Good evening. I'm Amadin Ogbewe. The decision to move the capital of Nigeria from Lagos to Abuja was made in 1976, the 3rd of February to be precise, by the late General Murtala Mohammed. About 44 years later, we still are not completely aware of the situation of the Abuja Original Inhabitants. There were plans for a settlement in the Abuja Master Plan, and tonight we shed more light on that, the current situation of the Abuja Original Inhabitants. I've been joined tonight by Bitrus Lawrence of the Abuja Original Inhabitants Youth Empowerment Organization to shed more light on the matter.
It's still live, right?
Yeah. Mr. Lawrence, good evening. Welcome to Talk Talk.
Good evening. Thank you, Amadi.
All right. Before we start, just for the viewers out there, so there's no confusion. You are an Abuja Original Inhabitant, right?
Oh, yes. Proudly. And I'm an Abuja Original Inhabitant from Garki community in Amak.
All right. Now let's start with the basics, because a lot of people don't know the genesis of all of this. Who are the Abuja Original Inhabitants? What is their story?
That's a very broad question, but let's start to say who are the original inhabitants. First, we are human beings to start with, and then we've been living in Abuja for centuries and decades. We've always been in Abuja, even before Abuja was named Abuja. Our people have originally been here. So we are, just like you've read in many reports, we are predominantly farmers, and we're known for farming as our major occupation. And then we're peace and loving people, and then we're currently hosting the nation's capital, in the most and the fastest growing capital in Africa, in West Africa actually. So that's who original inhabitants are, and then we're people, we're nine tribes in Abuja, and then we have the Gbagi, the Koro, the Gana, the Basa, and then some others that have actually been part of us, the Koro as well. And then we've been existing here since time immemorial. We've actually been existing here.
All right. Now the issue now is, first of all, I don't think people are actually aware that there's more than one. A lot of people who do know enough know that about the baggies, and I think that's pretty much all they know. But let's talk about the start of all of this, when Abuja was chosen, and it became that place. People call it virgin land, as though there was no one there initially. Let's talk about the agreement. We know that at the beginning it was said that the original inhabitants were either to be moved to the nearby states, or they would be given places within the city itself. How is that fair? Because now we're hearing that most of the inhabitants end up on the outskirts and away from the rising development that we're seeing in the city center.
Yeah, actually, since the move of the nation's capital, since 1976, when Murtala, and then from Lagos to Abuja, of course, we know that Lagos was not a very comfortable and a good settlement for the nation's capital to be, because according to their research and what they actually wanted was to get a place that was more central and a place that would be easily developed, and a place for several other reasons. So yes, that's how Abuja moved from Lagos to FCT here. The plan, of course, was when the government came, Abuja, Abuja FCT is actually carved out from Kogi, Niger State, and also Nasarawa as well. And then by landmass, it's about 8,000 square kilometers. And when that happened, there were originally people actually who settled here. But there was some said report that was made by the then Murtala that said there were nobody living. Abuja was a virgin land. So basically what they said in that report as well was the land was actually more fertile, it was more flat, and they said they did not see anybody living there. But that report was actually very wrong and actually unfair, and has been one of the key problems we're actually facing as a people here. Because if anybody will see a land as big as that and you say there's no living organism on it, I think there's something questionable about such type of statement, especially when it's not we're not living in BCs. We're living in an era like this where African have actually started experiencing democracy and several growths within the city, and Nigeria at large also was also a huge commercial location. So people were already here. So our people have originally been here. We've always been staying here. And then for the plan the government actually have and how they've been integrating and implementing it, there were talks that the original settlers who actually were here, which is the original inhabitants, those who were interested in actually moving, they should move to neighboring states. Some of our people actually, and then they were going to be given some compensation. So some of our people actually moved to Niger State, some Kwara, some Nasarawa, and so on and so forth. But those who, no, it wasn't willingly, because most of it was under duress because of how the situation was actually presented to them. And it was more like you take it or you leave it. And then after some time, President Olusegun Obasanjo's era came in, and that was where he recognized that, of course, there are actually original inhabitants who are here. And then they came up with the speculation that they need to compensate the original inhabitants. And when they did all of the research, and the compensation they were supposed to pay was such a huge amount, as at that time was almost 4 to 5 times bigger than the Nigerian budget, since it's around 2-point-something billion naira at then. And then they felt and got advised that it wouldn't be nice, or it wouldn't be favorable, or very financially, they would not advise Nigeria at then to financially commit to that. So what they did was, okay, if those who were interested in staying should stay, and they are actually going to be integrated as the city grows. So it is all of those discussions that have moved on to the present day that we're seeing today. And then the present day, the administration was set up it started in Gwagwalada, then later on moved to somewhere you call Area 1 today, before the federal secretariat that you actually have in FCDA today. And there's now a department that should be a ministry on its own, but it's called Department of Resettlement and Compensation, where it's expected that all original inhabitants issues that regards land and all of those things should be dealt with. So, but what we've been seeing these days, according to the master plan that was later created, was there are certain areas that were carved out for public infrastructure, for developmental issues. So that master plan is supposed to be executed by the government as development comes in and to fro. But what we see today is that there have been situations where the master plan is not actually been actively followed or obeyed. Because we're saying that this is a people who are actually living in this area, and they said this particular area, according to the master plan, the public infrastructure will come on it. And we say public infrastructure, we're talking about roads, ministries, and many other public infrastructures. But the situation we get today is a situation where original inhabitants are actually moved out from where it's considered to be public infrastructure, and then only to see some other people using it for private businesses and also private infrastructures.
Just a question there. The master plan itself, does it, if it was followed religiously, would it solve any of the issues of marginalization and all that, or are there still some tweaks needed? Yeah,
of course. Like it, for development to actually happen in any way, some people have to sacrifice, and I see it in great sense. We're actually the sacrificial lamb in this situation for Nigeria. Pretty much like the Niger Delta, surviving Nigeria, and then sometime back it was the far north when we used to do cocoa and all of those things. So Niger Delta, because Nigeria is mainly focusing on crude oil. So in FCT, the situation was we are sacrificial lamb because we have to give up so many things, and then the most important thing that has to do with us, which is the farmlands. And the farmland, because our people are farmers, the farmlands are where we have to give up for certain development to actually happen, for the nation to actually develop, for the nation's capital to actually move forward and actually grow. So we've actually been, how do I put it? The plan has actually not been effectively followed, and it has greatly affected our people, because according to the Constitution or the Land Use Act and all of those policy documents, people, before moving people, there's supposed to be some form of due adequate compensation. But the thing is, our people have been moved. Several communities have been displaced. Some have even been moved out of the Federal Capital Territory itself and moved out to some other states, and they've not been this adequate compensation that we're talking about. And then this is where some of the issues and agitations you've been seeing in time past spring out from, because there's certain agreement on how things should be done by the law and also by the Constitution, but that is actually not being followed. And then that is as relating to land and all of these demolitions you're actually talking about, than the sacrifice that our people have to make for the nation to actually grow.
So what is the response of the government when you put this forward? You are owed this, you're not giving us what's going on. What did they tell you? What is the response there?
Okay, actually, it has not been favorable. You understand? It has not been favorable, because you just cannot just take my land, and say the land belongs to the government. I mean, originally, even before Nigeria came to be, this has been our ancestral land. This has been where our forefathers have lived, and this has been where it has been carved out as theirs. So, but now democracy have come to us, and then we are supposed to work within the confinement of the law. Then this land has been taken, and there's a provision of the law that actually says that X, Y, Z should be done if I'm actually going to be moved. But I've seen a situation where X, Y, Z is actually not done, and I am moved. And then if I go to court to seek redress, it becomes, and even get justice in some situation, the provisions are actually not enforced. So, I mean, we get judgment, and these judgments are just treated like they're just declamatory judgments, and a judgment that cannot be enforced in many situations like that.
Is there a particular one?
Yes. For instance, the documents are actually there. One, sometime in 2020, another community called Akpajiya community, very close to my own communities within the Garki chiefdom, was actually demolished. And the essence that there's going to be a road and all of those infrastructure there. But these communities have actually written to the FCTA with issues and complaints concerning the whole processes that they've not been captured, they've not been actually duly compensated. The government cannot enforce this and forcefully move them out until their terms and conditions are actually been met. So they were still in discussion and all of this negotiation, and then all of a sudden one day they have a 2-month notice that government is actually coming. So they went to court while the case was still in court, and some sort of stay of execution was actually granted to stopping the government from actually doing anything within that time. But you wouldn't believe that someday by 1 a.m., the heavy military came in, trucks and all of those, and then brought down the buildings. And some of those people could not even lift a penny out of their houses. And this is a practical situation that actually happened in many communities within the FCT. So are the people supposed to fight the military? Are they supposed to fight the police? Are they supposed to retaliate? That is what we don't know what the government actually expects the people to do, because we've actually seek all the constitutional means to redress some of these issues. In some cases, they even protect. In some cases, I mean, you've gone to court. Matter is still in courts. They suspected that the government or whoever that is confined by the Nigerian Constitution, who is law-abiding, should actually wait until matters are actually trashed from the court before any form of execution. But we don't see that here. So this is a pure case of injustice, and it is not fair to our people, and then we consider it really, really heinous.
All right. Let's talk about the issue of Abuja or the FCT being treated as a state. I know it's a topic of contention. So what's really going on there? And also, I from what I've heard and seen, Abuja is not recognized as a place of origin, so to speak. So how do you navigate that as an original inhabitant? Let's talk about some forms you have to fill sometime, and they need your state of origin. How do you navigate that?
Okay, I'll use myself as an example for that. When registering for JAM, because after, of course, primary, secondary school, you want to further your education. So there are columns and provision. I'm just using JAM as an example, the educational system, where it's expected that you should put your place of origin. So in that place, Abuja is not actually captured. So a lot of people like myself have to pick up neighboring states like Nasarawa, Kogi, and all of those places, just so we can carry on with the form, because that provision of the form is actually marked with asterisk, so it means you have to put in something. But when you go through the drop down, your FCT is not there. But when you go to choose exam center, where you want to write your exams and all of that, you realize that FCT is there. So this is a pure situation of recognizing Abuja as a place, but not as a place that people come from. So this is really, really sad, because we are over 2 million people in FCT. We are alive and we are very, very active and we are breathing. So how else do you expect us, where do you expect us to claim as our place? Because while every Nigerian can claim their state and also claim Federal Capital Territory, we as original inhabitants of FCT do not have a place to claim. And this is just one example from the many other things that we're actually cut off from. From developmental activities we're cut off from government structures we're actually cut off from quota system we're actually cut off, and many other things. So it's really, really sad. And then by the constitution, it says FCT should be treated as if it's a state. No, FCT is actually a state. This is a constitutional issue and requires some constitutional approach, because we've gone to court to actually seek interpretation of that provision. The barrister Baba Panya actually went on, and we got a court judgment that actually says FCT is actually a state by interpretation. And that court judgment also came with another judgment that mandates the minister, which is the federal capital, they mandate the president, commander-in-chief of the armed forces, to appoint one original inhabitant into his federal executive council, so that we can have and feel the sense of good governance and also feel included in key decision-making processes that have to do with our people.
Just for the sake of clarity, right now that does not exist. There is no spot for Abuja inhabitants.
There is no such thing. There's no such thing. We do not have representation at many levels. First of all, just to call it, we're in political era, and by next year, many people are actually going to go to the poll to choose who becomes their governor, who becomes their House of Rep member, and then their state
Senators.
Assemblies. But in FCT, it's different. We do not have such privilege, or we do not have such opportunities. We only have very limited opportunity. We are confined with one senatorial zone, 2 House of Rep member, and 6 area council chairmen. And FCT is a place that is as bigger than Washington, D.C. FCT alone is bigger than more than 3 to 4. It's bigger than a lot of states that have more zones within their domain. But why is FCT treated differently? By population, we do have the population that a lot of states do not have. By landmarks, we do have. So, but how comes FCT is treated as if it's just a state when there are actually people living there? So who governs us? Where do we take our cries to? Where do we actually move our ideas? Who represent us? No representation in Federal Executive Council, like you know. No any form of government structure that is actually put in place to cater for the needs of the people. One senatorial zone for a place that is as big as FCT, what do you expect? 2 House of Rep member to tackle situation that has got to do with over 2 million people. How do you expect them to be able to handle all of that? So we are seeking that we need more senatorial zones like every other state. Every other state has 3. FCT also needs 3. We need 6 House of Rep member like every other state, and if possible, a state assembly. So we're not saying that we're not saying that we want a state inside the Federal Capital Territory. No, we're saying that we are 2 million people. We need to be represented. We need our own representation. We need to be able to vote for who actually governs us. So as it is right now, and based on how it's been working, it's assumed that the president, commander-in-chief, is our governor, and all the states, the National Assembly members are actually our. So how do we talk to these people when they have the entire nation's issue to actually handle? Do you get what I mean? So the government is not inclusive enough for us and does not capture us in any means. And decisions have been made that affect our life without us being on the table to actually talk about them or share our own view or share our own opinions on them.
So what is the journey so far in the mission to try to get some of these things, wanting a mayor or a governor, so to speak? How has it been? I know your organization and other inhabitants are really pushing for a lot of these things.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the progress you've made?
Okay, of course, there have been several agitations and several talks in multiple fronts at some levels. Some of original inhabitants are honestly, because we're really tired and we really want to see solutions. So at this point, our people are mostly pushing for anything that can actually work. So I'm not saying we want the state status. Some are saying give us a mayor for us to start there. Some are saying give us a minister at least. Maybe we can start from there and start lobbying for many other things at federal level. And some are saying carve out our own state from other states so that we can have our own place. So a lot of it.
Sorry, I don't know if you can go back on that. How do you mean?
Okay.
Away from Abuja, or how do
okay. I want you to also recognize that Abuja is over 8,000 square meters.
Yeah.
And barely 2,000 have been developed.
Okay.
Barely 2,000. All of this development you see, Metama, Kantampe, all of this place within the 2,000 square meters. Within. There's a whole 6,000 square meters that's development have actually not started touching or even affecting. So our people are saying that when we say we want a state, we're not saying we expect all of the Metama and blah, 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 and all of those things should be within there. So they've been the push that let it be Federal Capital Territory that is being governed by the government and administration themselves, and then the Federal Capital City that gets to the original inhabitants themselves, where we can have our own state status, we can have our own governor or mayor or whatever it is within the confinement of that Federal Capital City. So that's what we're actually talking about here. And then there've been architectural drawings carving out where all of this should come from and how this should have been many tests that many other people have actually put forward. So, but so far, that's what has been happening. And then what we've also seen, our people have pushed for several bills, at one or two bills within the Senate, and within the House of Rep, and also the Senate as well. Some did not pass first reading at the Senate, did not pass at the Green Chambers. So we've been seeing such situation. And then very recently, we've seen NGOs actually springing up with various advocacy and trying to lobby for the original inhabitants. Then one of them is actually the MacArthur Foundation that recognized the original inhabitant plight through an organization called CRISET, which is Resource Center for Human Development and all that. So, which is recognizing that, and that organization have decided to work with 10 other organizations who are actually working, which my own organization is also part of. And what we are agitating or pushing for is to promote the rights of the original inhabitants of FCT. So we're talking about the environmental right, the cultural right, the political right, the service delivery, and many other things. So these have been some of the fight and some of the journeys so far. So our people have actually been pushing. And there is also an intent to actually take all of these agitations to the court to actually seek for more interpretation and enforcement of certain judgment that have actually been gotten by the original inhabitant. And then there have been lots of publication and papers out there calling on the government to actually do what is needful and recognize FCT as a state, give FCT their right by appointing one member or one original inhabitant into the Federal Executive Council. And then there's also conversations that our organization is also pushing for, where we're saying, just like NDDC, we understand, which is Niger Delta Development Commission, we also need an Abuja Original Inhabitant Commission where all our issues and problems or struggles can actually be tailor-made through that part. Because trust me, the FCTA and the Department of Resettlement and Compensation alone is not enough to actually handle some of the situation. What original inhabitants face is big enough. And I will tell you, sometimes people like to draw comparison between the original inhabitant situation and the Niger Delta situation. And I say it every time, and I say the Niger Delta situation, of course, is not a good thing to talk about. But when you look at it realistically in close view with the original inhabitant issue, so Niger Delta are actually facing where the government take the crude for national development and all other things surviving the nation, and then end up polluting their land. That is their situation. But then we have original inhabitant where our main source of income is actually farming. And then the land is taken, not just the mineral resources, not just that they are mining it out. The entire land is taken. And you know, land is actually the greatest asset man actually hold after human capital. So if you take away the land from the person that needs land to actually carry out his economic activity, what have you done to him? You've basically killed him. You've basically you've basically incapacitated him. That is the situation we're actually facing. So if Niger Delta could agitate and then through Yaradua down to good luck, we're able to get a Niger Delta Development Commission. Abuja Original Inhabitants also need that, because we've actually sacrificed a lot, hosting the nation's capital, and then we're losing our culture, is slowly fading away as a result of the influx of people. Literally every civilization you can think about is actually predominantly here in FCT. We're hosting all the nation's embassies in FCT, and all of these things come with several influence. We get our culture is going to extinction. Just many things that you can think about. You know what happens when civilization comes and meets you. And then when opportunity rises, we're faced with unhealthy competition, because we then have to compete with the very best of people that come from other nations and other countries as well, other states as well. When we're also faced with keen competition and all of those things. So these are situations that we're actually experiencing as original inhabitants.
All right, let's talk about, you mentioned some of the issues, cultural, I think you said political and all that. Let's talk about service delivery. We've seen, we've covered several events where we've seen the call specifically for amenities that some of these communities for Abuja Original Inhabitants actually lack very basic amenities. We're not talking about the best of the best now. We're talking about the schools and all that. What can you tell us about what the original inhabitants are suffering in terms of those amenities, and where, if you can cite some instances?
Yes, like I will tell you, when people say come from other countries or other states and they move to Abuja, they just see bridges, they see this, they see that. Remember I told you earlier that Abuja is over 8,000 square meters, and then what people see and talk about Abuja, they only get to see the Maitama, the Asokoro, the Garoki, the Wuse, and so on and so forth. But we still have communities that to access in Abuja, you have to go through Niger State. These are rural communities. And when you get there, and we tell people, we say, what you see in Abuja is not even half developed as you people imagine, because it's only certain part and certain portion that these developments are actually happening. And the development is tailor-made towards where the big fish are actually going to, neglecting those from the rural communities. You're not wrong. There are lots of communities in FCT that still cannot have clean water. they still rely on getting water from wells. Some of them have to share water with other animals like cows and all of those things within the communities. They're not even very far from the city center. There are communities not very far from Apo resettlement itself, Wasa, Waru, and all of those things. They still lack very basic social amenities, and even access to health service is actually a problem. And then and there's also those who are affected by the impact of this development, because when government move them away from where they ordinarily stay, they have to move to a more remote area. And then when they move to a more remote area, it means their life changes. Their life changes because if they were basically in Gariki axis or wherever axis they were, and then they are now moved to boundaries of FCT like Abaji and all of those places like that. So you don't expect that the quality of life they have there is going to be the same, because of course development is more centered within the city center. And you know how Abuja is actually planned. It's very poorly planned in my own opinion, because there is over concentration of developments in the city center, neglecting the city area. Most developments are actually more focused in one area council, which is the AMAC. So if you walk here, you will notice that during the day, in the mornings, you see more vehicles coming into the city center, and after the day, you realize the city center is completely empty. Now, this is how Abuja is actually being planned. So those who come in, lots of people rushing to work at the city center, and we don't have amenities at the rural areas, which is some of these places in the other area councils. So that really affects. So when you talk about service, you just see good roads in the city center, mainly in Amak and all that. But when you go into Buhari, you're going to Abaji, you're going to Kuje, it's not the same thing. It feels as if you're not even in Abuja in some cases. You get, especially axes like Abaji, when you come in, if you go, there are communities within there that they still do not have roads. You still have to battle with lots of trees and all of those things to be able to access certain areas. So development is still far-fetched. So when it comes to service delivery in FCT, it's more focused on the city area and not the rural communities.
That's interesting. And I'm sure there's also advocacy to correct that. But from what you've been saying, I'm wondering, to break it down, some of these places where the original inhabitants are still present, perhaps to put it in simple terms, in the way of development, is it part of the plan? Do these people, I'm talking about original inhabitants, do they have this sword hanging over their head that they know that someday soon they are coming? Or is it a deviation from the master plan that makes it such that places where original inhabitants feel is theirs, is not going to be taken, suddenly they get a notice and it says you have this amount of time, you have to move to, like you said, to a more rural area and all that. Are these things, were they all written down, or is it a deviation from the master plan that is causing it?
Okay, actually, two things. One, deviation from the master plan, and that is one. Then two, there is also a situation where doing the needful is not being done. And then what I mean is that we do have the master plan that actually pinpoints where the cultural sites are, where the railroads would pass, where sporting activities and stadiums will actually be recited, and all of those things. So there are actually some of these places that are actually mapped out. So now that's not the problem. The problem is actually not the master plan. Where the problem is when the master plan is being tweaked to fit in some other people who are presumed to be more Nigerian than the original inhabitants. Just like the earlier example I cited, I'm living here as an original inhabitant, and I'm told that by the master plan, this place is supposed to have the national stadium on it. And then whatever hectare of land that place is, I'm being forcefully taken out. And then the next thing I see that same place I'm being taken out from, they've created buildings where other Nigerians are actually living on. And that's a problem.
No stadium.
No stadium. That's a problem. Do you get? And that is what happens most times. Now, this is what happens. That's on one side. And the other side of it is the fact that while I'm being taken out, they actually lay down guidelines and processes that must be followed. and certain requirements that must be met before I'm being taken out. Now, those requirements are actually not met. If you meet these requirements, it means you have adequately compensated me by law. But these requirements are actually not met, but I'm being forcefully taken out from where I am staying. Or in situation we see where government come and implement some of these things halfway. Now, before government moving you out from your own place, it said it has to provide you another land, make sure that that place is accessible, have the very basic amenities and infrastructures in place. But we've seen situations where original inhabitants have been taken out from their original communities to another place, and that place do not have access road, do not have water, do not have many other social amenities and social infrastructures that you can talk about. And when original inhabitants move there, what do you expect? Their life become harder, because if where they were staying originally, they could access water, access many other things, but you're taking them somewhere else, and that place could even be farther, could be meters away or a lot of kilometers away from their place of work. So you make life more difficult for them, and you put them in a place that is not very favorable to them. And then sometimes the government also neglects several things, because when you move people from one place to the other, there are lots of impacts that actually comes with it. Is Environmental Impact Agency considered within the process of this movement? Are all the agencies who are supposed to be in place aware? Have they given their own remarks on all of this thing before this thing is being executed? No. So it is when government and wherever flood all of these processes and all these lay down rules and principles or regulations, that is when our people are disgruntled. That is when our people are really, really angry by the process, and you see them revolting and actually trying to go on protests and also violent in some cases.
That's really interesting. We hope that the relevant authorities and everyone, stakeholders, are listening and they take notes of the things you've said. Thank you very much for coming on Top Talk.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
All right, that's how we end the program.
My name is Sheilo BCFR, the Black Comedian of the Federal Republic. I tell you, when it comes to the best of entertainment, the best of news, the best of information, something that is educative, you're right here at the best place to see that. It's Captain TV. You know what? Increase the volume. Keep watching. Don't touch the dial, okay?
It's your girl Nkechi Blessing Sunday. I want you all to keep watching Captain TV.
Please keep watching Captain TV. It is the best TV station in the country. They're doing an amazing job. Please do not touch the dial. Keep watching. Thank you.
My name is Sheilo BCFR, the Black Comedian of the Federal Republic. I tell you, when it comes to the best of entertainment,